Thanks everyone for coming tonight. You're all very welcome here for Tina's talk. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce you to Tina Rowe. She is our artist in the attic for 2023-24. The official title, of course, is not Artist in the Attic. That sounds slightly, I don't know, Oscar Wilde. The Artist in Residence in scheme is a collaboration between the University of the Arts London and the British School at Athens. And it is a scheme whereby an artist at the University of the Arts comes out to the BSA for a period of up to about 3 months, where they engage with the BSA, with Greece. They undertake a period of research. And really what we've loved most about the Artist in Residence scheme is how people delight in the resources that they can use in the BSA. Josh Whitaker last year, he performed a dance. No, he didn't do the dance, but he had a dance in the library and he used the Fitch Laboratory. And this year, Tina has completely submersed herself in the archives, much to Amalia's joy and indeed in Hannah's joy as well. Over the last few weeks, Tina has given us tantalizing glimpses of the kind of work that she's been doing. She every now and then will say, I found a lovely photograph and you really must see this photograph. And really what that's been doing is giving a very clever way of building up this great sense of anticipation for what she's going to show us tonight. No pressure. But let me get back to Tina. She's in the second year of her PhD at Chelsea College of Art. It's a practice-based PhD on collaborative portraiture, with the aim of exploring the identities of transracial adoptees through portraiture. She has had a long career as an artist, but also she worked as a learning technologist, working in lots of different universities. Her art is mostly focused on photography, or certainly that's her love, and the materials and processes in analog photography in particular. Tina has been an absolutely sparkling presence in the BSA. She has infected us all with her enthusiasm for Athens, for the BSA, for really old stuff in the archives, for just everything you could possibly imagine. And unfortunately, she's leaving next week, and we're really, really going to miss her. Some people may not miss her in the mornings because she's ridiculously energetic first thing in the morning. And if you ever want to find her, you can find her at the breakfast table from about 7:30 to about 9:30, where she keeps everybody happy and buoyed first thing in the morning with her breakfast chat. But we're going to miss you, generally speaking, and you've been fantastic this year to have around. We're very, very grateful to you for everything. So take it away, Tina. Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And thank you everyone at the BSA for putting up with me for the last 2 months. I've had a wonderful time. Let's see if I can make this presentation work. I'm actually a page on from where I thought I should be. I'm going to start here. Let me just see if I can. Oh dear. I'm just trying to get to the first title, but it doesn't seem to be there. It doesn't matter. I'm doing about that one. Are you sure? Yeah. Let's just start with that. Not that one. Not that one. That one. You want to start here? The Greek mythology one. That will do. Yeah. Oh, is it? It shouldn't be. Okay, never mind. Hello again. My name's Tina Rowe, and I'm an artist, and I'm going to tell you first of all about who I am, why I'm here, and my practice, and then I'm going to show you some of the work that I've been doing, and then I'm going to talk about the work, the archive, and what I've been doing with the archive. So first and foremost, when I was about 8 years old, I was in the library at school, and I discovered this book, the all-colour book of Greek mythology, and I was absolutely blown away by it, because until that point, I'd always thought of Greek mythology as being about fairy tales. But this book had the stories, but it also had photographs of the real places. And I thought, oh my God, these things are probably true then, aren't they? Because there's real pictures in there. And it kind of started my love of photography, because it made things seem really true and really real. And as a kid, I watched things like Jason and the Argonauts. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but if you're around about my age, you will have definitely spent some time watching this film. And I just loved all of these kinds of things. Now, I'm what's called a transracial adoptee. That means that I'm adopted. I was adopted into a white family in 1964. My mother and my father had 3 sons, and they appended me onto their family. I've got 3 brothers. There's 2 years in between each of us. And I had a really happy childhood, pretty much until I went to big school and I started to encounter issues around the color of my skin and how other people seemed to think it was a problem. Nobody in my family ever really seemed to think it was a problem. But we used to have wonderful family holidays. And this holiday is a particularly pivotal holiday for me, because my father bought a camera that's called a single lens reflex camera, which is a Praktica single lens reflex camera that you look through and you wind the lens to focus it. And I coveted that camera right from the get-go. And I chased him around all of that holiday, which was in Llangennet. It was in Wales, in a place called Rosili Bay, which I still think of as a kind of heaven. It's wonderful, Rosili Bay. And there's a place on Rosili Bay called Worm's Head, which is, I think, where we were on our way to in this photograph. And my dad wouldn't let me hold the camera, but he put it in front of my eye and he spun the focus, and the world it went from this sort of fuzzy gradient into being really sharp. And I was able to see the sea and the land and the water, and there was a frame around it. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing, that I could contain the world within this camera. And I coveted it and coveted it and coveted it. And I eventually got that camera. Unfortunately, I got it because my father died. But I then started to carry the camera around with me everywhere I went. And eventually I graduated to a different camera, which was an Olympus OM1, which is another single reflex camera. And I carried that around with me everywhere. And eventually, in the early 1990s, I moved out of the UK and I went to teach English in Poland. And I walked around Poland with my camera, and that's how I got to know Krakow, where I was living. And I photographed everything that I thought was strange and interesting. And one of the strangest and most interesting things was the fact that there were nuns and priests everywhere. I'd never seen so many nuns. It was like the sound of music on steroids. I was absolutely fascinated by it, because it was just completely foreign and completely different. So I would take photographs of all of these things that I found foreign and different. One time I met a man outside the Miodoga synagogue, which had recently been renovated, and he invited me in and he showed me the synagogue and he showed me the Torah and he told me the stories about it. And again, it was a way of being able to talk to people and meet people, was just following wherever my camera took me. I took pictures of everything I saw in the street. If I thought something was amusing, I'd take a picture of it, even if I didn't understand it. I've never understood that. I also took pictures of things that I thought had stories attached to them. I've always wondered what these two were talking about. And then also acts of kindness. One of the things that I noticed in Poland a lot is that people had a relationship with their departed relatives, that people tended graves a lot better than we do in the UK. And I spoke to this woman actually who was tending the grave of someone that she cared about. I took this picture of course in the cemetery, but the cemeteries themselves are really interesting. In November, and at the end of October and the start of November, they have this thing called All Souls Day, when families go and they tidy up the graves and they all go and visit the cemetery and maybe have a little bit of vodka. I mean, they have something similar in Mexico, but again, they didn't do it in the UK. So it was very strange to me. So I just found all of these different things and different things that I saw, different ways of behaving, were fascinating. And they all had little stories to them. At Christmas, everybody has carp on Christmas Eve, and on Christmas Eve you go home on the tram and there's all these people carrying plastic bags with live carp in them, thrashing about. It was, again, I just thought it was amazing. But then there were other things that really took me by surprise. In 1992, they started to film Schindler's List, and I was wandering around in Kazimierz, which had been the old Jewish quarter, and I suddenly bumped into this part of the film set. And although it was a fiction, it was incredibly shocking to suddenly walk into seeing the ghetto wall with the Star of David on it. it really made me consider and imagine what it might have been like to live there at that time. And it was kind of interesting because not long before that, I'd actually taken this photograph on the other side of the river. And I took the photograph because I liked the car. I thought the car was funny parked on the pavement. But later I realized that that is actually the only part of the ghetto wall that still exists. That's the real ghetto wall as opposed to the film set. I became very interested in different kinds of cameras. And in 2007, my husband bought me a pinhole camera. A pinhole camera is a really basic camera. It doesn't have a lens on it. It's just got a little tiny hole in it. And it means that you have to take quite long exposures. And on my 50th birthday, me and my two Bezzy mates, we went to Paris just for the hell of it. And we went out the night before and made a terrible mess of ourselves. And then the next day we went to this restaurant called Chartier, and I said, I'm just going to put my camera in the coat hook and leave it there whilst we're eating. And they said, oh, it'll never work. You'll never get anything out of it. And I got this photograph with an hour-long exposure. And what I found fascinating was, although all the things that had been moving fast had disappeared completely, like there were loads and loads of waiters, what I could see were the relationships of the people in these pools where they were chatting to each other and relating to each other. And I thought that was really fascinating and started to think about how I could use the pinhole camera in other ways. A couple of years later, I was in Brazil, and I was on a little train, and I wanted to take a picture of that, but it was moving. And I thought, well, I'm never going to get a very good photograph that way. And then I thought, well, the train is going this way and then that way. It kept going back to the same point. So maybe it would work. So I took the picture, and I discovered that you can get really interesting images that are about movement just by being a bit more patient with them. So I began to think of the pinhole camera as quite a powerful thing. The pinhole camera is a powerful thing. And around about, in 2011, my mother had a really, really serious she had a very serious stroke. And after 15 weeks in hospital, this is the photograph, the first photograph that I took of her after she'd been in rehabilitation. And she looks really well there. And I really like this photograph. But after that, she'd lost a lot of her independence because she was not paralyzed, but unable to use the right side of her body in the way that she used to. So I used to go and visit her and keep her company, but she was still a little bit ill. So she would spend a fair amount of the day asleep, and I didn't really have much to do. I mean, I took up running. I didn't really like running. It's not really for me. So I had my pinhole cameras with me, and I started to use this camera that was sort of disabled as a means to explore and examine her home and the changes that were made to her home because of her disability. And I took a lot of these long exposure pinhole photographs, taking in the changes in her house, like the different kinds of chairs that she had and the stair lift that she needed. And I found it kind of helpful for me to deal with my sadness at how poorly my mother had become. But my favorite photograph of all of these photographs that I took of her around her illness is this one here, which might seem a bit strange to be a favorite one, but this is the landing upstairs, and you can just about see in the background her Zimmer frame, but it's not very sharp, and that's because she'd come up the stairs on her stair lift, and she'd gone into the bathroom and done her business, and then she'd come back down, had a little chat with me, and then she'd gone back downstairs. And to me, she's actually in that photograph, and a conversation is in that photograph. The movement is in that photograph, and it's my favorite picture from that time. So although this is a really nice picture of my mum, in terms of it being a moment, this photograph is a photograph about the state and about the life that my mother was leading at that time. Just give me a second. I carried on using pinhole photographs. I've used them in other ways because I wanted to explore how we can be present in a photograph. And I started to do other things with the pinhole camera as a means to get in the way and be present in images. So these are some pictures that I've taken where I've put the pinhole camera on a tripod, and then I've run around with the lights of my phone. This is actually me and my friend Ray doing this. So we're present again in the photograph, but we're not obvious, but we are making emphatic decisions about what we're doing and how we're represented in the picture. I've been doing this process for, let me see, I started doing it in 2014. I'm still doing it now. This is one that I did in 2019 when I got up really early in the morning and sat on the swing with my light And I just like the fact that it's ghostly and it looks a bit weird and people wonder what on earth is going on. And it's a portrait of me. And that's actually the camera taking this photograph. And I think they look a lot nicer when they're pinhole photographs, to be honest. And the other thing I like about doing these photographs is it's performative, and I do these in really, really busy places, and people will stop and ask me what I'm playing at, and usually I will then get into conversations with them, and then they'll reflect on what their things that they might do with photographs and how they feel about doing that. Some people will tell me that they've made pinhole cameras or that they used to do analog photography. So it's a way of actually being in touch with the other people in the space, even though it might seem a little bit weird sort of thing to do, but I quite like doing it. So the thing about doing these kinds of the thing about my practice is I'm interested in how we can transform things and how we can tell stories using cameras and using chemistry. And I'm also quite a mudlark, and a mudlark is somebody that goes down to the Thames because the Thames is tidal and they pick up garbage from the shoreline of the Thames. And I used to go down there and pick up bits of pottery and the little old pipes and things, but I noticed that there were just loads and loads and loads of oyster shells. Now, oysters do not grow in this part of the Thames. They need to be in brackish water. They need salty water. So those oyster shells are proof of some kind of industry with people picking the oysters in Kent or in Essex and then bringing them into London where they were shucked and eaten and then thrown back into the Thames. And I thought that that was kind of interesting because it's the only thing that really remains of the people that did it. Because I don't know if anybody else has found a diary of somebody who did that, but I haven't been able to find any written accounts of people who do these kinds of things. There really are millions and millions of these shells. And it's quite funny now because oysters are such a luxury item to eat. Around about the same time that I started to do this, go down mudlarking, my brother-in-law gave me a box of negatives that he'd bought in a car boot sale. And if you've never really looked at negatives, they're not intrinsically hugely interesting. It's quite hard to imagine them as positives. And I was thinking about doing another project about transracial adoptees, and I was going to take pictures of transracial adoptees and print them onto objects that I'd mudlarked. And I thought, well, I know what I can do because I don't have these portraits yet. What I'll do is I'll practice with these images. And I started to print these images onto oyster shells that I'd mudlarked, and I print them onto the oyster shells by coating the oyster shells with liquid photographic emulsion, and print the pictures on like that. And I saw that these people that I was looking at actually looked a lot like the people that were in my parents' photograph albums and in my friends' parents' photograph albums. And I started to think about how I might display them. And I started to display, I decided to, I started to think about how I might display them, because what I wanted people to do was to pick them up and hold them in their hand, because the oyster shells are usually small enough to fit in your hand like this. How do I get to the Vimeo? Sorry. Maybe jump out. Okay. Okay, that's it, right? No. So the thing about these shells is thank you. Sorry about that. No worries. What's interesting about the shells is that you can roll them in your hands. And I noticed that the gestures of most of the people who picked up the shells and looked at them in the shows, that they were extremely gentle with them. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to inculcate this kind of empathetic holding and handling of the objects. It doesn't really bother me that the objects themselves can become scratched, because I can always print new ones. And to get back Oh, I just need to do that.
Mhm.
Oh, right, okay. See. Oh. What is- Sorry, you're not. Yeah, because what I want with these images is to encourage an empathetic way of looking at them. So again, what I usually do when I show these, works, oh, now it's showing. um, is that people will get down on the floor and really dig about in the way that they in the way that they investigate, and that's exactly what I want people to do, is to be investigating. And also what people will start doing whilst they're doing that is begin to create stories about the people that they're looking at, because oh, it looks like my Auntie Barbara, or it looks like my dad, or whatever, and I like that. Now, my process is also very much about exploration and experimentation. I run a darkroom in London with some other people, and we're called the E5 process, I should say that. And we are geared towards experimentation. We're quite a bit of a mucky darkroom, which can be a bit of a problem, but we do black and white and color and alternative processes. And I'm very interested in alternative processes because there are different ways of being able to create images using light sensitive chemistry. So this is a piece from what is probably the world's first ever photo book, and it was made by a woman called Anna Atkins, and she was a friend of Herschel, who developed a process of mixing a couple of chemicals together to make them light sensitive so he could reproduce his notes. And she was a botanist, and she realized that she could put plants that she was looking at on the seashore onto this cyanotype, onto a paper that's been coated in this cyanotype chemistry, and she would get an image of the thing that she was looking at. And this process has become extremely popular more recently, and it can be used in lots of different ways. And I decided, and oh, it's developed by, you develop by just putting it into water. You don't need to use a darkroom, you don't need any kind of special chemicals. So I like to do weird things, and this is probably one of the weirder things that I did, is I bought a wedding dress off eBay, and during a residency that I was doing at the Nose in Wilton on the Naze, and I coated it with cyanotype chemistry, and then I exposed it on the beach, and then I developed it by walking into the sea. And I'm going to show you a little film of that piece of work. Will it play from here? Yeah. So we'll get it from here. So this is the piece. I'm not going to show all of this because it's a few minutes long, but what I was interested in is the fact that the quite strong change in color that by putting the makes really interesting patterns appear on the dress. And you get these really lovely blues. That's kind of magical. And that's exactly what I like about using these kinds of processes. If you want to see it, it's on Vimeo. I'll send you the link later. Can I go back to here? I can do that. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research that I'm doing at Chelsea College of Art. As I said, I'm a transracial adoptee. And the thing about being a transracial adoptee is that all adoptions begin with a tragedy. That's what Hannah Poole says this, and she's also a transracial adoptee like me. And you have an adoption because there is a fundamental fracture in the family unit. And I was taken from my fractured unit and put into a very effective, loving family. And this is a photograph of my family that was taken in the mid-1970s. You can see that I think that everyone except for me sort of looks like everyone else in a sort of strange way. There's my grandma in the middle, my mum. I'm sitting next to my mum. I think I'm pretty obvious which one I am. And then my mother's sister and my mother's brother are sitting on the sofa. And then it's the spouses and the children all around us. And I used to say that I looked like my dad because he had brown wavy hair. So you can see him, he's like top right, second one from the right. But the thing about the problem with transracial adoption and this kind of tragedy, that a lot of people are kind of interested in the bad things that happen to us. People ask me questions about the racism and stuff that I encountered, and I certainly did encounter a lot of racism. But within this family, within this group that you're looking at, there are also tragedies. There are also stories that are sad. There are stories that are very happy. And what I'm trying to do in my research is to consider how all of us have these things going on in our lives, and how does this particular cohort, what kind of lives have they made, and with lives that have started under these circumstances. Now, the thing about race, in my experience, actually, because in my family, race was never an issue. I never had any trouble. I never had any kind of racial bullying or anything like that. My brothers and my parents, absolutely, I'm just part of the family. I'm absolutely part of the family. But once I came out of my family, then it was about the way that people talked about me. Now, I'm half Somali. Nobody knew anything about Somalia in the 1970s in Worcestershire, where I grew up. So I had all these things applied to me. There was a professor called Stuart Hall, who was at Goldsmiths, and he made this incredible talk that he called Race, the Floating Signifier. And he talked about how race is actually linguistic. It's more about how we talk about people and how we talk about things, rather than anything to do with the way your hair is or the way your bone structure is or the color of your skin. It's a really fascinating talk. And the thing about my adoption, the thing that was missing is that I was being brought up to be a middle-class white person, but I am also a brown person. But I kind of hid it all away and didn't really think about it, because I could never work out how could I approach a Somali, because I am socially a middle-class white English person. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I was Googling cultural heritage, and I found the work of an archaeologist called Dr. Sada Mire. And she was talking about cultural heritage being a human need. She has in her hand a thing called a wagir, which is made of olive wood, and it's part of a set of cultural practices from Somalia. And she talks about her own confusion about it, and she talks about its meaning and what it now means to her. And I thought it was so good that I sent her an email saying, "Can I be your friend?" And she wrote back to me, and she is my friend, and she's really great. And through her, and through working around through cultural heritage and my interest in history and archaeology and things like that, I've started to work with the Horn Heritage Foundation, and I run their digital museum, and I've also been able to ask questions and learn things about Somali culture and history that I don't think I would ever have been able to start conversations about these things without working on this project. And I also know much more about the kinds of people that live in Somalia. And although I can't really talk to them because I don't speak Somali, I understand now, because 50% of me comes from that place, and it is important for me to know, and I can't avoid it. It just is. Through SADA, I decided in 2022 that I think I will go to Somaliland. And so I set up a GoFundMe and I raised the money, and I did go to Somaliland, and I had a very interesting time that was challenging, but just fascinating. What was really strange is my hair and my skin were like, yeah, this is amazing. This is what should be happening to you. My hair started to behave normally. But I saw all of these fabulous things. This is in the distance. These two strange hills are called Nasa Hablod, and this is an area that SADA's hoping to do some work around. I also went to the market and met the women who sell goats who were absolutely fascinating, and they chased me around a little bit because I've got the worst hijab game in the world, but once they'd tied me in and made me secure in my hijab, then they were really friendly towards me and wanted to know, asked me lots and lots of questions. I learned a lot of stuff about how the market works. I learned that there's a veterinarian who's on the site in the market all the time, and it had never crossed my mind that a market in Somalia would have a veterinarian in that way, in Somaliland. Sorry, I shouldn't say Somalia. I also traveled to Berbera, and I saw Ottoman architecture. So there's Ottoman history in Somaliland, like there's Ottoman history here in Athens. It was really, really, really interesting. But one of the best things was meeting the girls. Now, I found the fact that there were lots of girls who wore niqabs there kind of strange. But through meeting them and discussing why they wear their niqabs was absolutely fascinating. And I bet you any money you like, the reasons that they wear them are not the reasons that you've been told that they do. But I'm not going to speak for them. But the most exciting thing for me was seeing how in Somali culture, how they built their homes, how they built their homesteads, how traditional farming went on, how traditional practices also bleed into modern life in Somaliland. I know that I could never go there and live there and be there, but I felt like a sort of chunk of me had been put into place. It was a really good experience. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to find ways to articulate in my PhD, because it is a lot easier to talk about tragedy and horrible things than it is to talk about just ordinary stuff. If we look at this painting, this is by Peter Bruegel, and it's called Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. And I presume we all know the legend of Icarus, and it's purported to have been done by, like I say, Peter Bruegel. And there's Icarus in the bottom right-hand corner with his little legs sticking up in the water when he's fallen out of the sky. And the poet Auden wrote a poem about how the great masters knew about tragedy and could write about it, but tragedy was happening all the time whilst we were going about our normal business. But I think it's important to recognize that there are some kinds of tragedy that people are much more interested in than in other kinds of tragedy. Like, nobody knows the name of the ploughman, nobody knows the name of the shepherd or the fisherman. Most people probably don't know the name of the painter. Very few people are going to know the name of Daedalus, but lots of people will know the name of Icarus, and that's because he's spectacular. And it is this interest in spectacular tragedy that I'm really concerned about in trying to do the work that I'm doing, because I don't want to make that the center of the work that I'm doing. Oops, sorry. So what I'm thinking about with my PhD is how we can tell stories, and do we actually need to stick absolutely to the facts? Because a lot of the time when you're transracially adopted, the actual facts that you come across can be either cold and hard sort of social services documents or court documents, but the people who were involved in it and their stories, they're much harder to get at. And how do I was thinking about what are the ways that we can go about exploring those stories in the ways that I tried to explore the stories of the people that I printed on the shells. And there is a writer called Saadia Hartman, and she has got this idea of critical fabulation, where she takes the facts from the archives and then she weaves a story around those facts, sticking to the known things, but then inventing the lives of the people that she might be trying to explore. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of storytelling going on. It doesn't have to be completely true. It's your truth. It's the story that you want to tell. And that's what I'm trying to pursue with the work that I'm doing with my PhD. And I know that people have this urge to do that, because when I was on the residency in Walton-on-the-Naze, I took some of my shells again and I threw them into the sea at high tide. And within a day, they were appearing on Facebook groups where people were beginning to tell stories about them. And there were bits of the truth about what was happening, but then there was also the conjecture, because there's one of these people who says, if you Google Victorian photograph and oyster shells, there's an artist working today and she prints random old negatives onto oyster shells. Well, I kind of do. I don't print Victorian photographs, but it doesn't matter because he's got the meaning of what I'm doing. And I like that. And that's what I'm sort of working towards in my PhD. Oops, gone the wrong way. So I'm interested in how we remember things and what do we do with our memories. So going back to my mother, whilst I was looking after her, when I used to go and visit her, I used to spend a lot of time looking around her house, and she had lots and lots of these little ceramic collection things. She had all these little thimbles that commemorated this, that, and the other. And she was it always used to drive me nuts when she would talk about how nice it had been during the war. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? It was a war going on with terrible things happening. And she would talk about her experiences as a young adult during that time. And then we had COVID in 2020, and I just had the very best time during COVID, because I was living in my studio with my, I was living on the yard where my studio is. I had access to my studio and access to the people that lived on the yard at the same time. And I started to think about how could I make a commemoration like the commemorations that my mum did. So I got my friends all to go to photo booths with their masks on and do like mug shots. So one side, that side, front and back. And then I got plates, and with the liquid emulsion that I'd put on the shells, I put them onto these plates as commemorative plates of the COVID pandemic. And of course, all of the galleries were closed. And so I just started to display them in random places around London just for the hell of it, because I'm a show off. And it was, again, they would start to appear on things like Twitter and Facebook and stuff, and people would talk about them. There would be conjecture about what this was all about. And that was what I wanted. I wanted people to create stories around these things. Now, making work with other people's stories is something that I'm trying to do. And so I've been trying to make work thinking about the British School in Athens. And I've been wondering, first couple of weeks, I just sort of wandered around Athens looking at stuff. And one of the first things I looked at a lot was the Tower of the Four Winds, which I thought was fascinating. But I also thought it was fascinating that on the plaques around it, it showed these different views. And it even told me that at one point that had actually been a mosque. But there is a sort of solidified version of what Athens is that's for people like me, the touristy kind of people who come here. And I think it's interesting is how we pick those stories and what those stories actually come to mean. Because there were mosques, there were more mosques, but I've only seen one mosque since I've been here. I presume there were lots of other ones. But I don't know, I'm not complaining about it. So then there's what I've chosen to document in the same way that I'm making decisions about what I'm interested in whilst I'm inside here. Now, my PhD is about portraiture, and one of the things that I needed to learn to do this portraiture was this big camera that I'm going to use for a particular set of processes. And so I brought that with me to learn how to use it, and I've been using it to make paper negatives of the school. And one of the things that I really noticed about the school is the different light that we have in here. It's so different to what we have in the UK. And I started taking pictures, making these paper negatives that I reversed in Photoshop. And they've all been, I've had problems with the light and the way that the light exposes on the paper negatives, because paper isn't really designed to use as a negative. So I get a lot of this glow happening, but I kind of like it because then it becomes an aspect of the school itself and also of the kitchen. I love the kitchen. You mentioned the kitchen. I love being in the kitchen. But all of these areas where you get these beautiful reflections, this is what I chose to document with a big camera. This is one of my favorites. There's this little bit of light with the going through the chair. I love that. I don't know where it's coming from, but I look at that every day. Again, the kitchen, I do like the kitchen. But downstairs also in the library, it's been wonderful being able to have access to the library and to all the archive areas in the library. And the mechanics of how these things are kept is just absolutely fascinating to me. And the stillness around these things. and also my bedroom, which I love. I love my bedroom. It's really great. I also bought my pinhole camera and I did some handheld pinhole shots of the fish market and also some of the larger objects that are in the environment, and my bedroom again. But the main thing that I've also, the other thing that I've got really interested in is the archive itself, because the archive I find absolutely fascinating, and particularly the photographs of John Pendlebury and the family and his family papers. There are these beautiful little booklets of negatives, and I really like these. Some of them have these beautiful little notes on them as well. Unfortunately, some of the negatives have completely disappeared. And also, some of these notes do not correlate with what you actually see when you look at the negatives. But even that is nice, because when it isn't clear what it is, then again, there's a space to make another story. And even in some of the books, and one of the books at least, I saw that some of the negatives had actually been torn out. So of course, there's a whole story there. It's how did that happen? Why did that happen? Where's it gone? Questions, questions. And then looking at the negatives themselves, I scanned them and then I reversed them. And there are some of these really beautiful pictures, but there are also things going on with the negatives themselves. Now, this negative has got a lot of silver on it. That's why there's this grey sort of smudginess on it. And there's also a thumbprint on it or a fingerprint on it, which I think is really exciting because I get excited about things like that. This has happened quite a lot in quite a lot of the pictures in the archive. And I think they look really nice. They're actually nice pieces of artwork as they stand, these rather strange, poorly developed negatives. But it's telling me about the person that developed them. It's telling me about what they knew, what they were doing. It's making me think, well, this probably was done by the person that took the photographs. I don't always know if they were John Pendlebury's photographs, but I kind of like to think they are, because I want to write my story. There's a lot of really lovely photographs in there. This, I think, is the hand of John Pendlebury's widow, Hilda. And I think this is I really, really like this picture. But then he took photographs, lots of incidental photographs when away from the digs. Like, he seemed to like animals quite a lot, particularly tortoises. This is a great picture of a pig. And then there's stuff that was going on around the British School on its own. Like, that's an amazing snow person. And these two rather lovely women. And then there is this photograph. This is an absolute banger. I really like this, because you're looking at the snow-covered area, and what you don't notice until you look harder is that this person has got a snowball on their head. I have no idea why that's doing that. So it was just really interesting to sort of be digging around and seeing what was piquing the interest of the photographer, because I don't know all the time that it actually was the photographer. This is quite difficult to see because it's a very dark negative, but this is a road accident of some kind or some problem with the car. So again, here's a story. And this, I reckon I would have taken this photograph because that building looks like it's surprised. It really does to me, but that might just be me. But it's a really beautiful, again, it's a beautiful photograph. And this, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. And again, why are these children there? Whose hand is that coming in on the right-hand side of the screen? There's just so much that you could sort of pull out of that. So to finish off with, I've made a little film where I've looped together a lot of the photographs that I found in the archive that are photographs that are personal photographs. And I've put them with a piece of music that I got that I could use with Creative Commons. And so I'm just going to play this to you. It's about 4 minutes. I hope you like it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. That was incredibly moving at the end. I kind of feel a bit sad for all the people who are no longer with us there, who just went. I mean, the person who was lying face down in the grass.
I love that picture.
Not a care in the world.
Yeah.
It was really amazing, and don't go, or at least come back and do something like that every year. There were lots of things that you were talking about that were really reminiscent of lots of things that we do as archaeologists, like making stories by rifling through other people's rubbish and things like that. And thumbprints, I really like finding thumbprints on pottery when potters have just gone too much or something like that, and it does give you a lovely insight into the person, that idea of somebody leaving the thumbprint on the negatives. I'm sure there are lots of questions or comments. Any questions from the audience? The Argus, I think we'll keep an eye online and see if there are any questions online. Is everybody cold or are you okay? You're okay. Any questions for Tina? Go ahead.
I have some technical question. In terms of, I mean, how do you print them on a plate? What kind of emulsion are you using?
It's just liquid photographic emulsion. It's the same emulsion that you get on commercial papers. You can buy it in pots and you just melt it. It's suspended in gelatin and you melt it and you just paint it on things. And
so you can't bring it on airplanes?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, you can?
I usually do. I didn't this time because I didn't think I had access to a dark room, because you do need a dark room for that.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry, I think I had to have you. I was just wondering what camera temporary you've been using.
I don't know. The negatives were
And the notes. There is.
I think there's more than one. So there's square ones and rectangular ones.
There's one photograph which is circulated of Mercy Money-Coon. They're taking photographs of each other.
Ah.
And she's holding that, and I'm assuming the same for kind of look down into it. That's the only kind of evidence of the photograph he did. Sorry.
Yeah, he did.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But I can show you the photo of Mercy holding it.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Yes, I didn't see that one.
I love that photo of the Acropolis. Oh my God.
Oh, with the snowball.
Well, no, it's actually the cars.
Yes.
So close to
Yes.
the gate.
Yes.
Oh my God, how did they get cars up there?
And can I just say, like, some of the images that you showed, because we haven't digitized the negatives yet, I have not seen before, which is amazing, like the snowy Acropolis, because what he printed and decided to put in his albums is something different.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Beautiful, absolutely
But
beautiful.
it was one of those from the BSA as well, the garden with the snowy.
That's lovely, isn't it? With the snow woman.
So
Yeah.
it must be the domestic staff.
Yeah.
And it was
Amazing.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm talking other questions. Go ahead.
It's sharper. It's just brighter. It's like somebody polished the sun or somebody put a gauze in front of the sun for us, because it is much more contrasty than the light I'm used to. And the way that I would normally have printed on paper, it would have been okay, but I got a large amount of blown out highlights, which I liked. I like it because it means I'm in Athens. But yeah, you've got better light.
Oh,
Well,
it's so much better.
It depends on what you want. I mean, like, I like blotches of bright light in dark, where there are dark bits of light. I like a lot of contrast. I mean, I've also been in Estonia, where the light is softer a lot of the day, but I like that light as well. I like dusk in England as well, but I've never been in a position where I experienced for such a long time the light that you have here. And it's winter light as well. I'd like to come in the summer and see what it's like then as well. I'm sure it's quite warm. Probably melt my camera.
Didn't take a breath from to live here during the summer.
there's a lot of artists who write about the light of Greece.
Yeah.
And it's well documented, especially British artists coming to Greece.
Because we,
It's a huge history of people describing the light of Greece or trying to describe it.
yes, because there is definitely a lot more contrast. It's amazing. And we went to, I don't know whether this is an aspect of Greek light, but we were in the, what was that cave we were in at the weekend? We went to where there's a, oh, we went there, and but inside the cave, because there's lots of silica and quartz, there's also all this other light being, but there's a glow in there that I've never seen inside a cave before. So that's also an aspect of it. It just wouldn't happen in a cave in England like that, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know, I'm not an expert, I could be talking rubbish.
Other questions or comments? Eva?
Well, comment that I love your work, and I really love how in the end you show how you make the archives into a new artwork. And I really loved how you as a photographer with your vision.
Oh, thank you.
Created that, which is of course similar to what you've been doing, but it's also a different thing you created, and I'm really fascinated to see it. I'm a big fan of city art and historic.
Yeah.
And I use it as well.
Yeah.
So far, I only imagined it to be used in archives that are not visual. So it was interesting confrontation for me to see, oh yes, of course, that happens with images as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So giving a voice to the voices that are just numbers.
Yes.
Her word.
Yeah.
But I can see it in the last thing that you did for the archives as well, even though you have images, there's still the unspoken, that you can give a different voice. So maybe I have a question, and something I don't know, maybe not able to answer, but if you would apply the critical formulation to the work you've been doing, is there anything in particular that came up to you in terms of what you've evaluated? Because you asked those questions, I wonder how far you dare to take that.
It's made me think about other things, bizarrely, and other relationships and other stories. But what I've really enjoyed is being around experts, and as opposed to people with opinions about stuff, people that actually really know stuff and have considered opinions about what things signify. And it's made me go back and think about some of the things that I've had opinions about, and also where I've not questioned things and not asked questions. And I mean, like with my mum, before she died, I spent a lot of time with her, talked to her, I had a lot of stories from her, but there's still stuff I don't know, and I will never be able to find out now. And I'm very aware of it. And then there's other things I need to ask questions about. So if that makes sense. But...
Yeah,
Other questions? Katrina?
I wanted to ask you about context,
Uh-huh.
because a lot of the time when I was looking at your work, I was thinking about context, and especially the context of the archival images and where they were taken and who they were taken by and what did. But I kind of think that might not be of interest to you. Hear me out. But I was then thinking about like place and movement and displacement and pulling someone out of context, and and not adopted, and all of these kind of things started to correlate in my mind. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
I think that you can find context in lots of things, and you if you sit with something long enough, you're going to be able to draw connections with it. And like, I felt I was really very much a fish out of water in Somaliland, but I also felt like I sort of belonged in a weird way. But I know that doesn't really answer your question. But it's about being willing to do it, I think, wanting to find links, which I do. I do want to find links with things.
It's kind of voyeuristic the way you put your plates on a wall and shells, the oyster shells, and then scroll through Facebook and things like that, looking for people's comments on it. It
Well-
must be hugely fun.
It was, I'm not a member of that Facebook group. My friend is, and she
Ah.
screenshotted it. So I'm like, no, put it out in the world, so do what you want with it. It's none of my
But then you don't
business.
follow it up after to find out people's reactions.
Not really, no.
Space is not liking.
Well, that's things, I think that group is called Things Found on the Naze. So it's stuff that's been found on Walton on the Naze.
And what about your plates? I love your plates. We should have a series of BFA plates, wouldn't we?
I take commissions.
All the directors.
Put them on boats, much better.
It's just that my mum had all of these plates that I used to hate, but then I realized that they had meaning for her, and you can make meaning in those things. And also the plates that I was using, they all came from these big services. They would have come from wedding gifts. People would have had, like a huge dinner service, and gradually it all got dissipated and broken. And it just, that also seemed quite sad to me as well. So it's a way of putting things back together.
Very nice. Yours.
Well, thank you very much. It was fascinating.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Plates, on the subject of plates, I think they're similar to oysters, the way that they're used.
Yeah.
In the sense that we eat from both of them. And these oysters in the tunnels, they could be Roman, couldn't they?
Yeah.
So many and so many new ones all the time, I don't know.
Well, there's no way to warm them out, so.
That's the Museum of London said they might be, some of them.
No way.
Yeah, they did, because I went, they are,
You can find them all over Britain
yeah,
in big quantities, very near Roman sites.
Yeah.
Romans loved it, they imported them from France.
wow,
from
France,
Europe, yes.
wow.
So that's another element that connects your work with that knowledge. You don't know.
Do now,
We
Right.
start putting photos of amphora and other Roman pottery.
I would love to, but I think I might get into trouble, so.
I've now decided what I'm going to do with my mother-in-law's dinner service. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you very much for sharing your work and for the talk. And I have a question on, sorry, if you could also speak a bit more about in terms of the different types of cameras, which I'm not so familiar with. So, but this thing of how some, could you speak about what types of cameras again, and then in terms of how that, in terms of process, and also how you connect to the specific photographs? Can you speak a bit more about, there was the photos where the light was, I don't remember if it was like, so there was the light was sort of captured in the photograph.
With lines, yeah.
And then, so there was that sort of movement. And then in the photo that you spoke about, when your mother was the upstairs hallway,
Yes,
and you said that to you, that photograph also had conversation, movement in it, and then again, like the movement was in a different way, not so much like as in the other way that visuals for the. Yeah, just in terms of I'm thinking about the different types of movements in those works, and also could you keep like what cameras you're using and how.
I was using a pinhole camera for those, and with the pinhole camera, it doesn't have a lens, so it has to have a long exposure. And that means that anything that isn't moving is completely static, but that means that you can move and run around, and it will pick up the light because it's bright. That will hit the lens. So that means that you can make it look as if some kind of magical being is running around doing things when it's just me walking quite slowly with my phone. So I'm just harnessing the fact that a 7-minute exposure is time for me to play in that space and make a bit of a fool of myself in public. But
And then it was the same for the photograph of the hallway.
Oh yeah, that was a pinhole as well. Yeah, that was again, it was a 7-minute exposure. So she came up the stairs very slowly on her stair lift, did her business and went back down again. It's just because it was such a long period of time, I was able to have a chat with her whilst I was taking the photo, which I like. It's a photo of my mum, of a memory of my mum. And if I tell you about it, then you can probably imagine that relationship as well. So.
Go ahead. Just type in some concepts and ideas, because your talk sparked a lot of experiences.
Of course.
I guess just following up from previous comments, I don't even know if this is a question. I'm trying to think through some of the contrasts in your work between permanence and impermanence.
Yeah.
And as someone who works with history and cultural heritage, it obviously ties on debates around cultural heritage, around intangible and tangible heritage.
Yeah.
What's to be kept held inherited, what is meant to be kept permanent, like an archive, which you've been immersed in, but also you share your work freely, like you let it go, you put it out into the public sphere. And sometimes you treat it like a seminar, right? As if it's not meant to be held in the way that we conceive of conventional archives. Like it's out in the world and it's mixing with its contexts, in different contexts, so it changes. And in turn, I guess that kind of parallels what you're, I think what you're trying to tap into when you talk about the adoption process, perhaps, or am I just totally just thinking too far left field and none of those contrasts? Does that echo some of what you're trying to do?
In terms of adoption, that's what I didn't quite get. Well, yeah, because I mean, adoption is a permanent state. You are through contract moved from one family into another family. So I have exactly the same rights as my brothers do as part of my family. Whereas I know my birth mother, but I have no legal relationship with her, even though she gave birth to me. So that's quite a weird position to be in, because you have this mandated state that's different to the natural state. and people do talk about your natural parents or your real parents. They will talk to me about, have you ever met your real parents? Have you ever met your natural parents? And there's a whole different language that we use to talk about this state. We talk about birth parents, adoptive parents. I'm trying to answer. Yeah, but it's something that I'm trying to work through at the moment, which is why I'm doing the portrait project, which is, well, what has it done to us? How does it play out in who we present ourselves as in the world? Because it's totally part of who I am. It's absolutely 100% part of who I am. It affects the choices I've made, but it affects me politically, emotionally, intellectually. Haircut, the works. So,
thank you. That was just wonderful.
thank you.
Just wondering, when you were showing some of the pen-free photographs that you scanned, there was the ones that were quite silvery and were, you know, they weren't in great condition, but you managed to make them look really quite good. And is that through? So you mentioned something about reverse scanning. Like, what was it you did to kind of correct the damage on the negative?
Where you can see the silver, I've scanned them as if they were documents. And where they've come out as images, I've scanned them as negatives and just reversed them in Photoshop. So I've scanned the silver like it was on a piece of paper. So
that's great. You know,
they're cute, aren't they? They're lovely.
There's so many things so it's great that you can make them look.
Photoshop is your friend.
Don't say that.
Well, it's my friend then.
Are there any online questions?
Yes, there are a couple. One is, what's your favorite object to capture in Athens so far?
I love the graffiti. I just love the incredible creativity of the graffiti artists. I mean, some of it is well shonky, but I mean, some of it is so smart, so clever. And people also put objects up. I've seen incredible things stuck to walls. some
There's
quite-
a pair of tights on a bollard just up there, but it's quite funny.
I love it. I think it's really good. I think it's really good because the fact that people, you don't get paid to make graffiti unless you're Banksy, I suppose. And still people feel the need to make marks, which they were doing in ancient
Yeah,
times as well. I love that.
And another is light, shadow, high contrast, diffusion of light, and detail are recurrent themes in the work. What are you going to make next, and using what types of medium?
I'm currently investigating doing color reversal, because what I want to do with this camera, I'm using paper negatives, but I'm using color paper because I want to make images that don't have a negative, so there's only one image. So you put the paper in the camera, then you develop the paper using black and white chemistry, and then you develop it again using color chemistry, and so there's no negative, it just reverses. And that's what I'm working on at the moment because I want to make completely unique prints. So, and please have a look at the negatives.
This is absolutely messing with my head. It is the most familiar scene to me, but it's completely wrong.
Sorry,
But like I cannot get my head around.
it's back to front as well, don't forget.
I don't even know how to I don't even know how to put that the right way around in my head. Even though I've spent about 30 years, 30 years in that hall, the way I said. You should have a look at it. It's just totally mind blowing. Anyway.
I should say that I developed all of those with the wonderful help of the Bleach Collective, who are an amazing group that Tessos and Julia, who have a dark room, and they also run all sorts of courses in Athens, and everybody should go and meet them because they're brilliant. Sorry.
Tina, thank you so much for all of this. It's been amazing, fabulous.